Welcome to episode 7 of the Dorothy L. Sayers podcast. Today's topic, hell. Like last time, we'll talk about the idea of hell as presented by Sayers. Last time we talked about heaven. And she takes her cue from Dante himself, the medieval author of the Inferno, which a lot of us read in high school or college. It's odd to talk about hell in the springtime. This show is actually airing in April. But as anyone who has been on vacation knows, hell can follow us to the most beautiful places. So let's find out why. Last time, we met Piccarda Donati, a blessed soul who taught us how helpful and relaxing an acceptance of God's will can be. The scene that Dante writes for her in paradise is calm and clear, like reflections in the water. But now let's picture something different. There's a buffeting of wind, so much that you can barely hear yourself think. Spirits are flying around like birds, but in pairs and with no control. They are pulled every which way. After a while, one pair zooms close to us, and we ask Virgil, our guide, if we can speak to them. He says yes, so we call out. The pair is able to stay long enough to have a conversation. We learn that the woman of the pair is Francesca, and the man, Paolo. Francesca does all the talking, and this was her story on Earth. She had been unhappily married to Paolo's brother. One day, she says, we, that's her and Paolo, read for pastime how in thrall Lord Lancelot lay to love, who loved the queen. We were alone. We thought no harm at all. As we read on, our eyes met now and then, and to our cheeks the changing color started. But just one moment overcame us when we read of the smile, desired of lips long thwarted, such smile by such a lover kissed away. He that may never more from me be parted, trembling all over, kissed my mouth. We read no more that day. Sounds like so many love songs, doesn't it? I mean, you're reading along, you're reading something you probably shouldn't be with somebody you probably shouldn't be reading it with, and one thing leads to another, and you read no more that day. But the couple, Francesca and Paolo, have condemned themselves by this act, seemingly by this act, to the second circle of hell, according to Dante. Why so harsh? Yes, it was adultery, but was it really so wrong? I mean, she was in a really unhappy marriage. But it is perhaps more than that, this adultery. It's in Francesca's character, actually, that Dante shows himself such a subtle writer. Even Dante the character, that's the guy traveling through the Inferno, meeting the shades, not Dante the poet. Dante the poet is the mastermind behind all of this. He has a lot more subtleties than Dante the character does. Even Dante the character faints for pity. But there's something that Dante the poet puts in Francesca's speech that reveals an attitude, a direction of her will, that is more problematic than any physical act. Francesca's quotes, by the way, are taken straight from Sayers' own translation. So when I was reading that, that's Sayers' translation, which is entitled simply Hell and published by Penguin Press in 1949. And just like in the previous episode, when we had discussed these things today, I'm using Sayers' 1948 Cambridge lecture entitled The Meaning of Heaven and Hell, which she wrote before the translation. The essay, by the way, is reprinted in the introductory papers on Dante, Volume 1 from Whip and Stock Publishers. And if these topics interest you, I recommend you get the book from Amazon. So back to hell. Hell is an attitude. We all already know this if we think about this. The sun can be shining and all will be well with the world, but we can ruin that. Just a word will do, maybe two. On the other side, humans are remarkable in their ability to have joy through trying circumstances. Our talk on heaven touched on that a little bit, and there's more to say. But hell is fundamentally, according to Dante, according to Sayers, and if you look at it according to the church fathers, really, it's a place, definitely a place, but it's also an attitude. To talk about hell, we should talk first about the fallen angels. According to Dante, it took the fallen angels all of about 20 seconds or less to fall after they were created. This is mentioned in Paradise, Canto 29, if you're following along. Sayers says that it is because the angels were pure intelligences with no bodies, and as pure intelligences, they are, quote, made in the mode of instantaneousness, and do not change or develop or progress. They are what they are wholly and immutably and move, as it were, all of a piece, end quote. Now, for me, I don't actually know why intelligence should be led to instantaneousness, but it sounds like something a medieval philosopher would say, and we're just going to leave it there for now. But whether it's short or long, why did the angels fall? Basically, they did not admit the goodness of God. They and their leader Satan thought that they could do better. By the way, this is not all spelled out when Jesus says, I saw Satan fall like lightning. which he says in the Gospels. But Isaiah hints at this situation in chapter 14. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. That's Isaiah. Satan's fall according to pride and wanting to be like God is a historic church teaching. Let me say that again. Satan fell because of pride. He wanted to be like God. The church accepts this. The church teaches this and has taught this for a long time. Neither Sayers nor Dante made it up. Anyway, as Sayers says, all that was required of those angels was to receive their beatitude lovingly, willingly, and realistically as a free gift of God. But they wanted to be as God, and so they fell. The fall of man has a bit more story to it, and we all know it. Sayers points out how man's limitations, that is, his intelligence, as in not his smartness, but the fact that he has a brain and uses it, he has rationality, and his body, they hurt him. He had more time to fall, as it were, but there's also an opportunity for atonement, unlike the angels. And as Sayers says, quote, man is not a pure intelligence. Actually, this is a longer quote. Let me read it to you. If you're getting lost on this whole intelligence speak, just forget about it. If you like it, just hold on to it. It's useful, but not critical to our understanding of hell. Okay, so where did we start this? Man is not a pure intelligence, but partly material, and it is his nature to develop in time and space and grow gradually into the life of heaven. Therefore, his knowledge cannot be purely intellectual, but has to be gained by experience. He is created good in a good world, but Satan suggests to him that there is a different way of knowing reality, and it can be known not only as good, but also as evil. God, says Satan, knows it both ways. If Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit, they will also know like God. Satan, however, carefully omits to point out that God can know evil purely as an intellectual possibility without experiencing it or calling it into existence, but that man, if he is to know it at all, must know it as he knows everything else by experience. Adam and Eve, intoxicated by the idea of being as gods, disregard all warnings and eat. They have their desire and know evil. Now, all of this allows for hell, the existence of hell, which was made for the angels and its inhabitants, humans who reject God, who want to be as God by rejecting him. But we are going to talk about the attitude of hell, and it boils down to this. We see what is good, and we call it evil. Let me say that again. We see what is good, and we call it evil. Sayers says it like this, quote, if we rebel against the nature of things and choose to think that what we at the moment want is the center of the universe, to which everything else ought to accommodate itself, the first effect on us will be that the whole universe will seem to be filled with an implacable and inexplicable hostility. End quote. If we're the center of the universe and the universe doesn't grant our desires, all of a sudden the universe is going to seem awfully hostile. Everything has turned against us. She gives the example first of a child who has fallen over a chair and blames the chair. This is laughable, very laughable. But then she says this. The grown-up Adam, having laughed at the child, may then go to Piccadilly Tube Station with the intention of taking a train to Stanmore. With his mind fixed on the test march or the sins of the government, he may neglect to consult the indicator, which is saying plainly that the train now at the platform is going to Watford. And when, having passed Baker Street in fond illusion, he looks up at the next station and finds that it is not St. John's Wood, but Marylebone, he will mutter savagely that he has gotten onto the wrong train. Neither will it for a moment occur to him that what he is saying is as absurd as what the child said. But what is wrong with the train? In the eyes of God and the London Passenger Transport, it is a perfectly good train, proceeding on its lawful occasions to the destination appointed for it by a superior power. To be sure, it has got a wrong passenger, who has nobody to blame but himself. But the determination to see good as evil and the right train as a wrong has entrenched itself in the very core of Adam's language. And here's something worse. She goes on. We all do this, right? I got on the wrong bus, picked the wrong car. There's nothing wrong with the car. It's our choice that's wrong. It gets worse. We may, she says, have the misfortune to know a jealous person. He exacts of his wife of his friends, of his animals, an exclusive devotion to himself which only God could be justified in demanding. And indeed, his demanding is part of his illusion that he is as God. So you can see that happening. She goes on to say that he misinterprets everything and is determined to do so, and so sees all evil as good. So sees all good as evil. If his wife likes having other friends and interests, he accuses her of being unfaithful and not finding him enough to satisfy her. If she shuts herself up and waits on him hand and foot, he complains that she is ostentatively making a martyr of herself for the express purpose of putting him in the wrong, and he darkly suspects that she is wishing him dead so that she can have a good time. If she is cheerful in company, he asks why she keeps all her gaiety for other people. If she is silent, then she is only trying to win sympathy for being so badly treated at home. I need not go on. Whether it is husband or wife, parent or friend, the jealous person makes his own and other people's lives a misery. This is the attitude of hell, to see all of God's good creation arrayed against you. Or, as she says, it is the deliberate choosing to remain in illusion and to see God and the universe as hostile to one's ego. Hell, then, the place of hell, is simply the granting of that wish, to get your own will, which is what you've been wanting all along. To remain in illusion by calling reality, good reality, created reality, cruel. Now, if any of you have read C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce, you may be thinking about his depiction of hell, which is very similar to what Sayers is saying. It's a shady, rainy place where souls can live wherever they want, and they inevitably want to live further away from other souls. So they get, they'll be in a house and their neighbor will get on their nerves, so they'll move a little further away. And they'll move a little further away. And the great sinners who have been there a super long time, they're way out there, way out there, because they keep moving further and further away. Now, they're miserable, but they're also enacting their own will. It's only in heaven, for Lewis and others, that the souls encounter reality, and it's actually quite painful for them in the Great Divorce. By the way, Dante's hell, while its inhabitants cling to their illusions that God does not love them, that they did nothing wrong, that it is always somebody else's fault, strips sin of all of its illusion. Dante's hell is ugly. Now, the inhabitants are deluded because they are only partially considering things. We'll talk about that later. But sin itself has no more gloss. It's ugly. The glamour has gone. As Sayers points out, this is, she's talking about gluttony here and then other ones. Okay, here it is on page 68. Okay. Gluttony loses its accompaniments of bright lights and holiday atmosphere, and is known in its essence as a cold wallowing in dirt, a helpless prey to ravenous appetites. Covetousness and squandering are no longer dignified by names like the economy of thrift and the economy of conspicuous waste. They are known as meaningless squabble about a huge weight of nonsense. Sin is no longer appealing. Sin no longer has a cool uniform. Rebellion is revealed as selfishness. That's why Dante's Satan is, in a way, so perfect in the way he's depicted. He's an insane, ravening monster. He's not a slick dealer. He's not some sort of corrupt politician or salesman. He's none of that stuff. At his core, he's irrational. He has an unwillingness to accept that a rational God made a good, free world. And so he has lost any of the appeal, any of the slickness, any of the beauty that reality gives us. Let's return to Francesca. Remember that she's paused in her whirling long enough to talk to us, actually to Dante, the character. Yes, they were reading Lancelot and Guinevere. Yes, they went way too far. But listen to her attitude. Notice where she puts the blame. When Dante first calls out to her, she answers thus. And here again, I'm going to quote Sayers, who is quoting Dante, but she just says it so well. She has a nice lineup. You have to look for it in Francesca, by the way. If you have, this is in Canto 5, if you have the Inferno in front of you and you're trying to follow along, you're not going to get it on the first reading. You're going to be like Dante, the character, and be like, oh my goodness, you were in love with Paolo. It was probably a bad strategy move, but you were in a bad marriage. I mean, you're going to feel bad for her, which is what Dante the poet wants. But he buries things in there for you to see what's actually going on. Okay, this is Sayers. Even at his tenderest, Dante deals ruthlessly with his egotism. Listen to Francesca. If the king of the universe were our friend, one begins to think that it's all God's fault. Love took hold of us. Well, love, as Dante had once said, is an abstraction, an accident, and a substance. Are we to put blame on an abstraction? My beautiful body was torn from me. I had no time to repent. And then, like the lash of a whip, the sudden savage snarl. Cain's place awaits our murderer. The soft voice resumes. You are so kind. I will tell you how it was. We were reading that lovely story. We thought no harm. Something came over Paolo and he kissed me. The book was a pander, and he that wrote it. So on and so forth. Sayers says God, love, John Ciotto, the novelist, were to blame, not we. We were the helpless prey of our own and other people's passions, and now we drift on the black wind. So skilled is Dante as a writer, guys, that he balances the appeal of sin with his stark reality. Francesca is just one example. By the way, she was murdered. Actually, she was that was the story how the story went. Like she actually was murdered. So, but her response to her murderer is pure venom, which you could say is understandable. That's forgiveness would be a talk for a different podcast. Okay, Francesca is just one example of this balance between sin and its appeal and its stark reality. Souls all over hell not only harp at each other, they curse God, they stare mournfully at their wounds, they groan, or they stare in heartless rigidity at the sinners around them. You know, it's a lamentable place. But when they talk about their sins, many of them say, I made a strategic error, or I didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes they say that, or I was pushed into this position. They don't repent. It's all in their attitude. In life, they considered their wishes a standard of right and wrong. And so when reality turned against their wishes, they cursed reality. But God called reality good. Okay, I want to end on two notes that aren't in Sayers' essay, but I think she would agree. First, in this acceptance and rejection of reality, remember Picarda at the very beginning in heaven, that's the last podcast episode. She's in the first layer of heaven, first sphere of heaven, and she's okay with that. She has no qualm with God's will. She accepts it, and there's peace for her. In fact, she says, in the acceptance of his will is her peace. Francesca and the others, they're there. They can't help being there where they are in the circles of hell, but they don't accept the justice of it. They don't trust God. So in this acceptance and rejection of reality, neither Sayers nor Dante nor the scriptures from which they draw advocate resignation in the face of evil. We've talked elsewhere how strongly Sayers felt about doing one's job and doing it well. This includes combating stupidity and misunderstanding, and in some cases, an actual enemy, such as in her era, Hitler. Dante put people who literally accomplished nothing in the antechamber of hell. Heaven wouldn't take them, and hell didn't want them. It's all right to call evil, evil, and respond to it. But calling good things evil, God himself, trees, the wrong train, the innocent actions of your wife, this is the essence of hell. And after I read this essay in preparation for this podcast, I thought, man, Dante, Sayers, they are right. When I start thinking, so let's say I get home and my husband hasn't cooked the dinner I want. He cooks dinner. It's beautiful. I think this is not as it should be. And in that seed is anger and wrath, and it makes for a long night. When I either have to deal with that and kind of bury it, or we argue, or I accuse him or something. But it's in that moment when I say, he cooked this dish and I wanted this dish, and he knew I wanted this dish. You're bucking against the reality. And that's when sin enters. Second, Dante's shoes. So anyway, the first point was, we're not talking about resignation in the face of evil. We're not talking about an extreme pacifism or anything like that. We're talking about fighting evil, but not calling what is good evil. Second, Dante shows truth in hell. Francesca didn't lie. She really was in an unhappy marriage. She really was murdered, yes, by her husband. Hell isn't a pit of lies. It's more like a pit of selective arrangement, in which there are many truths by which the sinners attempt to justify their own sin. So back to Sayers as we end. We all know the statement at the gate of hell, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. We're all familiar with that. But she reminds us of what the entrance to hell says before that. It says this, justice moved my great maker. God eternal wrought me. the power, and the unsearchably high wisdom, and the primal love eternal. That's not what you would expect to see on the gateway to hell, but Dante affirms God's motivations: justice, wisdom, and primal love. Love that allows a free will to be free from him. Well, that's hell for you. There's justice and truth there, but no love and no mercy. That's something to think about if we're tempted to extol only justice or only truth. These two are simply not enough for happiness. Thanks for joining me today. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at lindsayannschol@gmail.com or leave a comment on the YouTube edition of this episode. Have a great day, and peace be with you.